Now we are delighted to introduce our next esteemed speaker, Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, none other than John Denson. Now, John is a global business leader and international advisor on policy and a legal expert on international trade and investment. So please listen up and please take note and please welcome Mr. Denson.
I was just trying to see where that voice is coming from. It was slightly alarming. And I have a dear old friend of mine here, Daphne. How good to see you. You're back again. We were actually together yesterday in ECOSOC talking about some other of the challenges that we've seen. So it's great to be with you. And it's great to be with such an engaged audience today in New York. We're seeing people actually doing shout outs from the stage. Look, it's a real pleasure to be here at this Leaders Summit. Events like this fill me with optimism. We gather and we have around us passionate, intelligent and determined professionals who believe business can and must be a force for good. So that is fabulous, and it's a great sort of chapeau for my comments. But I think we should be a little bit honest here. As joyful as the environment is as I walk in today, I mean, I think we have to admit, I mean, the mood is a little heavy, a little dark outside. The world feels a little unsettled. I said yesterday with Amina Mohammed, there's a sort of uncertainty pervading. There's disorderliness. There's all these issues running around. And trade relations, and we're heavily involved in trying to revitalise the trading system. I think we can say they're topsy-turvy. I think we can talk about climate shocks, which are disrupting communities. We're seeing conflicts, not just geopolitical conflicts, but also societal conflicts disrupting our environments that we operate in. We're seeing economies struggling as well, and I see Axel here from the World Bank, and they do such amazing work in order to enliven those economies. And when I look at and think about the organisation I represent, one of our jobs, because our job is to enable business worldwide, is to find that certainty, to put certainty back to the extent we can, and to put order where there is disorder. These are things that we worry about. Because what we worry about, particularly as business people as well, is that when trust frays and uncertainty follows, when systems fragment, stability disappears, and frankly, when leaders retreat, the future before us, our options narrow. You know, you are all leaders, do not retreat is really the point here. But here's the thing. These uncertain times that we're in now, that is not our destiny. It does not have to define us. It never has. In moments like these, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the challenge. But frankly, businesses, we don't wait. We actually have to, and we do take action. Every day, entrepreneurs, SMEs, and larger enterprises are solving problems and developing innovative solutions for their communities. And as the institutional representative of more than 45 million companies in over 170 countries, 70% of which, by the way, are in the global south, we at ICC take action too. We actually don't ask for permission to do so. Take trade finance. Trade finance, which is the lifeblood a lot of the global trading community, but also for SMEs and for communities. Just think about the way in which trade finance has actually collapsed in a number of economies. Think about correspondent banking, the collapse of correspondent banking. Think about the correlation of that actually with the emergence of the Financial Action Task Force. There's a correlation between the creation of that in the late 90s and the collapse and the withdrawal. That was never the intention, by the way, of the Finance Action Task Force. The reason I say that is the action we're taking is time to look at that, those sort of institutions, those sort of frameworks, and say, are they working as we set them up? Has technology defined a new opportunity? Can tokenization, for example, help us? Because Financial Action Task Force was set up to deal with anti-money laundering. Are there other ways of doing it? Because the consequence of the intervention is actually much more dramatic. And correspondent banking has been the lifeblood, for example, of a lot of small island states, Caribbean states, and we've seen the economies significantly struggle. The remittance economy, you've seen how it's been affected. So we're not waiting to be asked, we're actually getting up and doing something about that area. Another example is financial regulation. Under current Basel III rules, banks are disincentivized from financing development and climate projects in emerging markets, even when those projects are backed by guarantees. We actually have been developing reform programs which would allow for targeted adjustments, which could unlock up to 4 times more bank capital for sustainable investments. We see this as part of the opportunity of a lifetime. If we get this right, we can actually find more capital to support the energy transition, particularly in developing and emerging economies, without compromising financial stability. And finally, take access to justice. In countries just like with India and Brazil, for example, there are tens of millions of commercial disputes just stuck. They remain unresolved. Do you know that the cost of those stuck matters in the system? It's a loss of $1 trillion worth of economic activity every year. So we are not describing the problem alone. We're then taking action. So we're creating, for example, at the ICC, a low-value disputes program, a platform which will be powered by AI that will deal with this, which will now enable us on scale to untap the economic activity. Because we see, for example, finance for development not being about pledges from advanced economies, but about creating economic activity, removing the barriers to economic activity in developing and emerging markets. Because frankly, friends, as I said in Seville, and I think actually you might have been there are no big pledges coming from advanced economies. The idea that the development assistance-led economic model will be the durable model for the future, I think, has been significantly eroded, my friends. It actually has to be private sector-led. It can only be private sector-led if it's private sector-enabled. So you actually then have to enable the private sector. You have to remove the barriers that get in the way of this. So these are not abstract data points designed to make the challenge seem insurmountable. They are practical examples of how aligning public and private incentives can unlock this enormous value, this economic activity, enabling businesses to invest, innovate, and deliver real-time solutions. Indeed, with 5 years to go before the deadline to attain the Sustainable Development Goals, it's clear that few of them will be realistically achieved. And even clearer is that the opportunity to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals cannot rest on governments alone. Indeed, the scale of today's global challenges require public and private sector to work together with a new model for sustainable development, one that activates markets, unlocks enterprise-led innovation, and builds trust through inclusive growth. So, governments must partner up with business to dismantle systemic barriers to economic activity, align incentives to unlock private sector potential for development, and co-create regulatory environments that facilitate economic activity. That's how we get the market to work in support of the sustainable development. And every day we at ICC see how businesses are already delivering real-world impact. So big corporations, small family firms, entrepreneurs, chasing their first dream. You know, when I was in Colombia, in Bogota recently, I was working on a project there enabling the creation of more opportunities for women to participate as SMEs. One thing I found really interesting was walking the streets with my friends there and talking to people in the street who are actually selling bananas, selling CDs, well, still working analog. And I said, what do you do? Yo soy empresario. I'm a business person. It's really interesting. Let's not forget that we're not just talking about large businesses, value chain leaders, big family corporations. People left to their own devices have a strong entrepreneurial spirit, which you know. They want to be successful. And why do they want to do it? They want to create a livelihood for themselves and their families and their communities. Yo soy empresario. We are all business people in a way. So let's cut the divide between civil society, business, and government, and let's understand that the important thing here is creating economic activity, creating opportunity. And so what strikes me every time I speak with these businesswomen and men is how much they have in common: the same determination, the same creativity, the same desire to leave behind something better for their children and communities. That's why the organisation I have the responsibility and the honour to lead, the ICC, has stood for. That's what we stood for since we were established in 1919. And we were established in the ashes of the First World War when a group of business people realised that governments were unable to act and that it was on the business community, if they wanted to ensure economic activity, to stand up and create an institution that would allow trust and confidence and create interventions that would support that. Practical things like, for those of you who are in business, Incoterms, so these sorts. That's what we did. We actually act where governments can't. We find certainty where there is uncertainty. We put order where there's disorder. That's why we created the whole concept of private arbitration, because companies could not have confidence in having disputes settled across borders because of lack of confidence and understanding in different legal systems. So we said, let's take this concept of arbitration and actually apply it to private commerce, and then develop a convention to enable it to be enforceable. That's the birth of it, but actually what drives all that is enabling, putting order where there is disorder, finding certainty for businesses. And I must tell you, in all those years, that mission has never felt more urgent than it does now in this sort of darker, tougher time, when there's a sense that uncertainty is what people think is what will be the future. So friends, the future of development beyond 2030 cannot rest on pledges or statements alone. It must be built on enterprise, on purpose, and on shared prosperity. It must be built on the basis that we can act, we do have agency, we do not need to wait, and certainly we do not need to ask permission. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Denton, for your honest and refreshing insight on how business can drive real-world impact by rethinking investment, scaling local solutions, and forging partnerships that deliver both commercial value and societal progress.